left, right.
I hate long video intros, but today we are talking about abortion, and really, we're talking about whether or not two guys can have a conversation about abortion, because some people watching and listening to us are not down for that. Either way, I'll let you watch the episode. Enjoy it. This is SipTalk. Grab a drink and enjoy.
Of course, it's good.
Cheers.
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 Episode 218. My name is Justin DiGiulio out of my basement in New Jersey, joined by James, the Bosnator Boswell, philosopher, philanderer, philanthropist, anything else that starts with a PH, out of sunny South Carolina. James, how's it hanging?
Philadelphian
Out of South Carolina. I am glad to be on air. It's a good place to be. No thanks to our audience. Not that we don't appreciate our audience, but our audience of zero, we are not thanking you tonight. So what's going on, James? Today we're talking about abortion. And
That's going to be the main topic, but I wanted to start with something slightly different.
But I feel like we're going to talk about abortion, and we are going to talk about Donald Trump. I feel like abortion is almost like swelling. I feel it's swell. It was not in the news for a couple of months almost. I feel like it's about to come back into the news with a pretty heavy wave. Do you feel about the same with that?
I'm not sure, because I feel like after the Supreme Court overturned Roe, there was a lot of coverage as some states rushed to protect the right and other states rushed to pull it back. There was a lot of coverage, but I think, it kind of died off for a little bit, and now you're seeing a number of news stories come out, which we'll get to. So maybe you're right. I don't know. It's hard for me to. Google Trends.
Well, I feel like it is picking back up. For those of you who are watching us, all one of you, I'd like to invite you, if you're watching on TikTok or Instagram, to join us on Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, or YouTube Live, where we can interact with you. We can see that you're watching. We can read your comments. Unfortunately, TikTok and Instagram, we cannot read your comments live. So join us on the other platforms. We'd love to have you here with us. So what's going on Google Trends when it comes to abortion?
So
or is it not a trend?
It's definitely a trend, and it went from very little discussion to the week of the Supreme Court decision in mid-June of last year to being super heavily covered, and then kind of really kind of dropping back down to baseline. So if you look at the graph, it goes like this.
And where are we right now?
Is
there any recent uptick? Because I feel like there's a bit of a recent uptick.
I don't know. I might suggest that if you were doing any research on the topic, it might feel a little bit more salient just because you were looking things up.
All right. So we first want to talk about Donald Trump because he was on CNN last night, which is an unusual platform.
Yeah, because he talked about how much he hated CNN when he was president.
And CNN talked about how much they hated him since he was president. And
before.
And after he's been president.
And after.
So what an odd place outside of Fox News for him to be on. Also in a
state, you know why?
He was in a state like New Hampshire, and there was a very heavy Republican audience. Why is that, James?
Well, first of all, the reason why he was on the network in any capacity is because, I don't know, maybe about a year ago, CNN got a new CEO, and he's decided to try and take the network in a direction that, in his view, is more towards the center. He feels that the network went out of its way to alienate some people, and so I guess they're tacking maybe a little bit too far in the other direction to make it seem like they're trying to be balanced. Why was it New Hampshire? New Hampshire's an early primary state. And why was it mostly people favorable to Trump? Because those are the only people that would want to attend.
it seems a little odd to me. So I'm all for. I was very much alienated by CNN because the shit that they were saying was fucking ludicrous. And it just like listen to NPR. I've listened to NPR every day for the last decade and a half. I can barely listen to it anymore just because I can I can feel the spin on what they're saying, and I don't like it. I want to know what the news is. I don't need any political bias when I hear the news. The news is just reporting what happened. However, the idea of having a presidential frontrunner on your platform, I think makes sense. However, at this point, Trump is not necessarily a presidential frontrunner. I mean, to a degree, he is.
He is for the GOP nomination.
However, giving him such early spotlight, I feel like actually pushes him ahead. And I feel like they're actually serving his cause by talking about him and paying attention to him.
Well, you could make the argument that they basically just gave him a 1-hour campaign ad.
Yeah, that's pretty much what it feels like to me. Even though the host he didn't get along with the host that well, and she was more liberal, if anything, but she was still setting him up to do what Trump does. And
not only was she doing it, but CNN was doing it, and I mean, this gets to the point that I wanted to discuss, which is when you have a platform, the larger that platform is, the greater your responsibility is for the content you have.
Yes, and when you put someone who's unhinged, and I'm just for the record, I'm not fully against Donald Trump. I don't think he's very presidential. I don't think he has any place running the country. But I also don't have Trump derangement, where people think he's absolutely insane, ludicrous, and et cetera, et cetera. I just don't think he's very presidential. I think he's way too controversial to be running a country. And I don't think that you should take somebody from the far end of any spectrum and put them as numero uno to lead a country. And there's a lot of bad shit that Trump does that we could go way into. But I'm just kind of prefacing with my political stance.
Ooh, someone's drinking a michelada.
Cheers, Justin. Got myself a michelada right now. That's Jorge. Jorge and I had a little tequila at the office and a couple of Heineken. So I'm glad Jorge could join us.
Melody says he's an Adderall addicted diaper shitter. I think that's actually the diaper shitting is difficult to prove, but I think that there's pretty strong evidence that he wears a diaper, and there's also strong evidence that he's addicted to Adderall.
Do we know that? Do we have doctor's notes?
No, but you have people who worked with him when he was like the host of The Apprentice talking about him doing Adderall constantly. Like, so it's anecdotal, but I mean, it's eyewitness, but you can't prove it.
I don't think there's anything that wrong with Adderall use, but whatever. So that's my point. How are we throwing spears and saying your downfall is you're an Adderall addict? When
actually, I could care less if he does Adderall. I think hold
on. Hear me out. The issue is the spears that we're going to throw should not be such lightly weighted spears as you use Adderall on a regular basis. It needs to, and that's where, like, when I hear NPR saying things like that, I'm just like, okay, but I'm not that has no weight.
I haven't heard NPR saying that kind of stuff.
If we're going to talk about anything, talk about the stuff that really matters. But you don't have to introduce somebody. They've been talking about January 6th as the deadly January 6th insurrection.
Well, it was.
Yeah, one person died.
No, multiple people died.
I'm pretty sure one person died several days after the attack.
That's incorrect.
Well, the number. I'm curious how many people died. Incorrect. I'm curious how many people died.
One Capitol Police officer who died that day.
Capitol Police officer who died
that day.
Okay.
There was a rioter who was shot and killed that day,
okay.
And then there were a number of serious injuries from the Capitol Police. Like hundreds of Capitol Police were injured.
Oh, so you have 2 deaths. Now, when I hear about an insurrection, you're describing this.
You also had a number of Capitol Police officers committing suicide in the months afterwards because of how they were treated, and those deaths are associated with it.
They're associated with it, just like somebody who got in a motorcycle accident with coronavirus died of coronavirus.
No.
again,
No, that's just a bad argument.
Just give me the details. 2 people died during this. Also, there were suicides afterwards. Versus describing it as the deadly insurrection.
But it was a deadly insurrection. That's not an incorrect statement.
But if you have 2 of 4,000 people that died, you shouldn't lead with deadly.
But it was deadly.
It was, but to a small degree. So I wouldn't lead with capital deadly. I might say there were deaths involved.
No. You can deadly is a completely accurate term. If you wanted to say the Capitol insurrection massacre, that might be an overstatement.
Now's some time for me to open this up. All right. What are you drinking down there?
Bush Ice.
All right. I was at the liquor store yesterday. I didn't see any Bush Ice. I would have bought some had I seen it, but I did just go
Milwaukee's Best Ice is a good second option.
I mean, it's not a good second option, but it would be a second option to Bush Ice. All right, where else are we going with this Trump conversation?
So, I mean, when it comes to Trump, I'm just going to say that if you don't think that he is a vile human being at this point with everything that we know, I question your morals and your judgment. Because even just this week, he was he was found liable in a civil trial for defamation of a woman that claims he raped her in a department store in New York. And they didn't find that he was liable for the rape, but they did find him liable for sexual abuse or sexual assault. So just that alone of liable sexual assaulter and liar, that's a matter of record. His fraud, I could spend the next 8 hours talking about all the different frauds that he's perpetrated. When he was president, some estimates are that over the course of his presidency, he told over 20,000 lies, 20,000 provable lies.
Look, I'm not
racism, the treatment of women, the treatment of minorities. I cannot see beyond his charisma of him just being an entertaining figure to witness. I can't think of a single positive thing that you can say about him.
So again, I don't like Trump. I don't think he has any place being the president. I don't think that we should shine the spotlight on him. We should bring him on CNN or Fox or MSNBC or anywhere in between. But, listening to him, I understand why people like him. He says things like, well, the last 4 years were terrible. The Ukraine, I would do better. The Ukrainian-Russian conflict, I would end in 24 hours. People believe him on those claims. And the issue is that he's the one making those claims, whereas other people are kind of skirting the question.
Well, the thing is,
also, hold on, one last thing about abortion. He said what we would do about abortion, what the Republicans and the pro-life people would do about abortion. So he basically double spoke and said that he was in that camp. What we would do about abortion, what the pro-life people would do about abortion is X, Y, and Z. And on a federal level, I think the popular vote when it comes to abortion, the popular opinion when it comes to abortion, is that there should be pro-choice. However, we haven't had a federal vote on it, and it's not being discussed at a federal level right now. I think there's a decent chance, actually, going into this presidential election, it may become a federal topic, a nationwide topic. Speaking of abortion, though, I think that's
so. All right, well, let's parlay into that because, I'll use this to transfer a little bit and talk about some of the lies that he tells. Because he was on stage last night and talked about how ending abortion was a good thing because before you had babies that were being aborted in the 9th month or sometimes after birth. And first of all, in any state, under any law, anywhere, if a baby is actually born, killing the baby afterwards immediately becomes a crime.
Yes, it becomes murder.
Yes. And in cases when abortion, for the states where abortion is still legal and when abortion was still federally protected under Roe, if you had a baby that was aborted in the 9th month of pregnancy, first of all, those cases were exceedingly, capital E, exceedingly rare, and only done when the mother's life was in true danger. It's not like you could make it
so
9 months in and be like, you know what? I actually don't want to have this anymore.
What is the oath that doctors take? What is that called? The Hippocratic Oath?
Yes, do no harm.
Do no harm. So no doctor would take on an abortion of a healthy baby in the 7th, 8th, or 9th month.
Absolutely not. Beyond it being illegal, doctors wouldn't do it even if it were, unless there was an extremely strong reason to do so, and the mother saying, I don't want to have this child anymore, does not reach that criteria.
Usually, not the mother saying, I don't want the child, but usually the mother's health being life. It
would have to be life-threatening at that point.
And then usually there would be a cesarean section that the baby would be born, and if the mother didn't want it, if that was really the underlying reason put up for adoption.
Well, if you were to have an abortion in the 9th month, chances are there was some very late complication in the pregnancy where the baby is no longer going to survive, no matter what the doctors do. And by forcing her to give birth to it, not only is the baby's life already kind of foregone, but by forcing her to give birth to a non-viable baby, it could endanger her life as well. Like the number of boxes that you would need to check in order to get an abortion in the last 4 weeks of your pregnancy is extensive. And
but those, as you said, were exceedingly rare abortions.
Right, and Trump made a representation on stage that those were happening all the time, and that by banning abortion and whatever, this was a good thing because we were getting rid of this terrible practice that didn't exist.
It happened, but it wasn't a practice. It wasn't something that was commonly and routinely done.
In terms of the popular support for abortion,
hold up. Let's on that note, with the words that you just said, there's no popular support for abortion. No one is encouraging abortions. No one's going, hey, pregnant person, you should have an abortion. What people are is pro-choice. That a woman has the opportunity to make a decision. And I think that it's really important that we draw that line, that it's not pro-abortion, it's pro-choice. And a lot of people who are pro-choice are anti-abortion, actually. Sorry, go ahead. I'll let you finish what you're saying.
So, popular support for the right to choose sits generally around 65%. And that would usually be phrased in the poll question of abortion should be legal in most, if not all, cases. Do you agree or disagree? And you usually you find about 65% agreement there. So nationally, pro-choice policies are overwhelmingly supported by our country. It's a very strong and vocal minority. Now, it's not like a super small minority because you're still talking about 35% or so.
Well, but also not of that 35% are they that vocal. You have a small percentage of that minority who are extra vocal.
Yes. But I would say that the 35% that think that abortion should be illegal, that's not a small minority. It's a significant minority. But agreeing with you, of that minority, most of them are not that vocal. Now, the thing is, it varies tremendously state by state, but even in the most conservative states, like pro-choice policies still poll above 50%. This is not a popular policy at really any level.
Well, but here's what's happening is because Roe was struck down, all of these states, which are led by Republican men in all of the cases, are
not all of them.
Well, Republicans.
The Republicans, yes, but like North Dakota has no M, and like she's terrible, but it's a Republican woman that's against abortion. But you're not going to find many Democrats that are against abortion. They exist, but there's very few of them.
But no one is voting on this, is where I was going with that. Populations are not voting on this. What's happening is people in power are saying, now we can do this.
A few states have voted on it, actually.
Which states? Okay.
Pretty soon after Roe, maybe it was November of last year, Kansas had a state referendum which basically, like, the way that it was phrased was really misleading, like, intentionally so. Whoever wrote this was trying to make it misleading so that people would vote yes on it when you really needed to vote no. But whatever the case is, the voters in Kansas rejected restricting abortion in a state constitutional amendment, like 65 to 35. It was almost exactly the numbers that, like, line up with national polling, where it wasn't like a 51-49 vote where abortion just eked out a victory. It was a resounding rejection of pro-life policies.
Interesting.
And so other states, I think it was Michigan most recently. No, Wisconsin had a state Supreme Court election that really came down to positions on abortion, and the liberal candidate won by a lot. And again, it's a lot of the people were voting for her because she was a stand-in for pro-choice policies. So any place where this has been put to a popular vote, like, pro-choice policies have won. The reason why you're seeing states where even when the polling is 55, 60, 65% in favor of pro-choice policies, you're seeing states pass these restrictions, is because the state government exists in such a gerrymandered world that if you have 50% Democrats and 50% Republicans, you might have 60 to 65% Republicans sitting in the state house because of the way they draw their districts.
So, can we talk about why Roe versus Wade was repealed? We had a whole episode on this, actually, like the week that it happened. But do you remember this episode?
Yeah, I remember the episode, and it's been a while since I actually read the Supreme Court opinion, so I'm having to draw off memory here.
Well, so what they said was that Roe versus Wade, which was a case that was ruled
1973,
to protect the right of someone to have an abortion, basically said that there's no federal right to have an abortion. They didn't say that. They didn't say you have a federal right to have an abortion. What they said is covered in the right to privacy.
The implied right to privacy.
Not even the right to privacy, but the implied right to
privacy through the 4th and the 14th and the 15th Amendment.
And what they call that is penumbra, which means shadow. So basically covered by the shadow of other amendments, you have the right to privacy. And covered by the shadow of the right to privacy, you have the right to medical operations of your choosing, being abortion one of them. And then Roe versus Wade ruled that abortion is within those penumbras, within the shadow.
And then it set parameters for when abortion would be legal and when it wouldn't be.
Yes, all within the shadow of another law.
Yes.
And when they struck down Roe versus Wade, what they said was, this is really reaching when we're putting this medical operation in the shadow of another law. And I, to a degree, say they have a point. We don't have a federal right to the right to pro-choice. I'm not saying we shouldn't, and I'm not saying it could be brought up at a federal level. However, the United States actually does not federally create laws on a lot of things. The drinking age, the driving age, there are many things that states rule on. And the United States is supposed to be set up a lot like Europe is, where you have a lot of countries that have a common rule so that they all basically get along. So the United States actually is much larger than all of Europe, maybe not all of Europe, but I would argue,
I think population, I don't know.
Geographic and population-wise, probably larger than all of Europe. And we all have to get along, which is why we have a federal government.
European Union's bigger.
What big countries are in the European Union? There's got to be one big country that just outweighs us big time.
Germany?
Population or geographically?
Hold on a sec.
Well, either way, the point that I'm making is that the way the Constitution is set up, the Constitution of the United States, is that they grant individual rights to states. And the states are responsible for creating those laws and creating the rights to rule of their state. The issue right now is that with Roe versus Wade being struck down, is that we have very polarized states and very polarized politicians, which I believe it was George Washington that said a two-party system would lead to the downfall of the United States. And right now we don't just have a two-party system, we have an extreme two-party system. Am I right on that quote?
I don't think it was Washington.
It may not have been.
I feel it might have been like Madison or Adams. But yeah, there was one of the founding fathers said like a two-party system will lead to big problems. And so yeah, like when Roe v. Wade was struck down, it basically just said that it's no longer federally protected, and it turned the issue back to the states. And so one of the lies that the Republican Party told while they were campaigning against Roe v. Wade was that it would just become a states issue. And then almost immediately you had politicians like our great Senator Lindsey Graham proposing a federal 15-week abortion ban. So immediately they started working towards like banning things federally when they said that it was going to be a states issue. And you now have some... So there were a number of predictions that were made right after Roe v. Wade was struck down that I think almost all of them have come true, which is that you would have polarization of the states where some states were going to be going hard one way and other states would be going hard the other.
Hold up 1 second. You got the four in front of you right now?
The what?
You have the four things that were going to come up in front of you right now? You have a list?
No.
All right, sorry, go ahead.
I'm just doing this off the top of my head.
All right, go ahead.
That you were going to have women in states that banned abortion, like having to go to another state for abortions, or you were going to have a number of women basically being forced to carry something non-viable to term, and also that women who had certain conditions like ectopic pregnancies or non-viable pregnancies of other sorts, like basically having to wait until they're almost dead until they can have the abortion, where they're basically like, they have to almost bleed out in the hospital before doctors will touch them. Whereas, and it's something where like, when you know that this condition exists, you can either deal with it now,
or wait until somebody's life is very much at risk.
Right, but like waiting isn't going to improve the condition. It's not like you're going to look and say like, oh, well, we thought that the baby was not viable 3 weeks ago, but it made a turnaround. These are conditions that are a death sentence for the baby.
So I just want to touch on a comment that we got via TikTok, which says, from OutGif, it says, interesting that two men are weighing in on their opinions. It's a woman's body and their decision. But OutGif, here's what I have to say to you. One, you're lucky that we're having this conversation, because there's a lot of men that are not having this conversation. And we are very much entitled to our own opinions on this. So, one, fuck off. And
well, hold on a second.
What more would you like us to do as men other than to discuss this conversation in the open, where, by the way, we are live, so you are very much welcome to share your opinion with us.
Well, and also, if it hasn't been made clear, at least for me, like, I'm all in favor of women being able to make this choice. I think
James and I both have fully resigned to the fact that it's not our choice to make, and therefore we are pro-choice. As in, we are not the ones making up anyone else's decision. So we're telling all women that they are entitled to their choice, and we're having a conversation about the political climate and the laws that are at play. I'm not even saying that you're saying we shouldn't have this conversation. All I'm saying is that I fully believe that us having this conversation is for the greater good. So for somebody to say, how dare you as men have a conversation? Well, we generally represent half the population, and unfortunately, we represent the majority of the political population.
I think it would be...
Not us.
I think it would be more justified to say, how dare you, if we were saying women don't get to make this choice, because then they could say, like, well, you don't even know what it's like to be pregnant. Like, well, sure. But I'm not saying that women shouldn't be able to have abortions. I'm saying that it should be, the state should leave it the fuck alone and let it be between them and their doctor.
But that's the right to fucking privacy, which arguably we don't have on a federal level, and we certainly don't have on a state level. So I listened to a few podcasts actually while I was mowing the lawn last weekend, which is my prime time to listen to podcasts, barely, because the lawnmower is very loud. And although I have noise canceling over-ear headphones,
I was just about to say noise canceling headphones are a game changer.
the problem is I'm bald and the sun shines down on my head while I'm mowing the lawn, and I don't want to have a big white stripe across the top of my skull.
Wear like a fisherman's cap or something.
I can't do it.
Yeah, you can. Who are you impressing?
I may drop $300 and buy like some nice Bose noise canceling headphones that are just in ear, not over ear, some wireless ones.
No,
well,
but just get yourself a hat, man.
Who's
gonna be taking pictures of your fashion choices while you're riding on your lawnmower?
I need the sun.
Sasha says get a do-rag. I like that idea even more.
That wouldn't be a good look. Somebody would call the cops on me, in this neighborhood at least. So let's go back. I was listening to some podcasts. Out of where they had guests and people telling their stories that are in states that have recently become pro-life states, meaning it's illegal to have an abortion. And they were talking, I think this was This American Life, the podcast. Either that or Radio Lab, both which are awesome podcasts. I don't listen to enough of them, even though I probably have listened to every single episode. And the one woman was a doctor, and she worked for a female clinic, and she was talking about people coming in and her not knowing which move to make. So, for example, someone has an ectopic pregnancy. What an ectopic pregnancy is, and let me just pull it up, is when the fertilized egg implants and grows outside of the main cavity of the uterus.
Usually like in the fallopian tubes.
Exactly, within the fallopian tube, and it's not a viable pregnancy.
There's nothing in the world that will make this pregnancy viable. No amount of medical intervention. Nothing can save it.
So she was talking about having an abortion for this person. And really what it came down to was she told women that they either had to go to the emergency room or wait or run the risk of losing her job. And she consulted a lot of attorneys, and they all said that she basically doesn't have, she's not able to make any moves in the direction of abortion for any women, even the women that are sick, until they are basically dying.
And in an ectopic pregnancy, you can very easily die from.
And that actually runs counterintuitive to her Hippocratic oath, where you take care of the patient, you do no harm. And of course,
can I want to talk about how in a lot, like, so what you're describing is absolutely true, where like doctors feel paralyzed and don't know what they're even legally allowed to do, and the next logical consequence of that is that in a lot of these states, you're seeing doctors that work in like OBGYN clinics, you're seeing those doctors would be like, I can't work in this state anymore. So like Idaho, for example, 2 of its biggest hospitals, and Idaho doesn't have that many metropolitan areas, so like 2 hospitals in Idaho is a big deal.
Yeah.
Like have closed their maternity wards because the doctors have all left.
So that's what she was getting at. She was talking to colleagues and other people that work there, and she said they had a vacancy of like they needed this person, and it was like I don't remember the number, but it was like at least 5 months where they operated on like a skeleton staff. And she was thinking about leaving. I don't remember if she ended up leaving or not. Probably I was mowing over some heavy grass or something. But I lost my train of thought a little bit.
Well, here I'll go along with this a little bit and say it's not unforeseeable that in the states with the most restrictive abortion laws, that women might not be able to access health care even for a regular pregnancy that they intend to keep, because there just aren't doctors that are willing to serve the population of those states anymore.
That's a really good point, because so what I was going to say is basically the Hippocratic Oath and taking care of your patient in many cases it contradicts these new laws, right? And when it comes to the woman who was telling the story was saying that her husband also works in the same field, and there was a possibility that they could both end up in jail. And what were they going to do? And especially early on, like you could end up in jail just being set as an example for the rest of the country or the rest of the state.
Yeah, so you're gonna have people that are living in these states not able to get health care for either dangerous pregnancies, which happen, or normal pregnancies. Because no doctor will want to work in that state because it carries too much risk, and there's plenty of jobs for doctors all over the country. So why wouldn't you pick a state where you can do your job?
But then also you have to worry about the doctors that did stay in those states, maybe advising you against your own health and for the health of the baby, right? So if you live in one of these states, so I mean, the thing is, if you go to, there's some people that think they're going to like an abortion clinic or
Are you talking about like the crisis pregnancy centers and stuff?
Crisis pregnancy centers, where they go in thinking they're going to understand what their next steps are in getting an abortion and what their options are. And then they're basically advised to prey on it and told that having an abortion will make them go to hell. And then
not only that, they'll even like a lot of these places will even say like if you have an abortion you'll be sterile for the rest of your life and all sorts of lies.
Exactly, and you don't want that being the only information that young women, and not even so much young women, that women are getting, because also it can be misleading. Just for the same reason we were talking about the news and the bias in the news, a lot of people can't see through that.
Well, and that's, going back to my original point about having a platform and having responsibilities. If you host a crazy person on your platform that gets millions of views, you have a duty to constantly be fact-checking and pointing out things that this person is saying, because not all of your viewers are able to tell whether or not this is a crazy person or not. But, hey, they're on a platform that gets multiple millions of views. Their views must be legitimate, otherwise they wouldn't be let on. That's the logic.
We are in a bad place right now. I don't think necessarily we're going to legislate our way out of this. And I'm honestly,
the platform responsibility thing you can't really legislate. That's just like you have a responsibility on a personal level.
That's viewership. I mean, who the fuck do you think watches CNN on a full-time basis? I can promise you, over the last 5 years, they are hardcore liberals. So
nobody watches CNN full time unless they're old or they're stuck in a doctor's office.
But I think there's going to be I thought this was something that happened like weeks ago when you brought it up to me today. I didn't even look it up. I on my way to look it up, I just looked at current news and it was number one on the Drudge Report.
What was number one?
Trump on CNN.
Yeah, because it was such a disaster.
Well, for who? Not for Trump, for CNN.
For CNN and for kind of like
liberal
America in general.
I mean, I would argue America in general, although I'm not in the camp of the liberal people, but just America in general. I am worried about the 2024 election. If it is Biden versus Trump, we have two bad options. And not that I wouldn't probably lean Biden, which I did the last time, but I don't want to see either one of them reelected, actually, in both cases.
The vast majority of the country agrees with you. The vast majority of the country doesn't want either of them to run.
Comment?
Sasha says lack of reproductive care also increases the risk of violence and homicide for pregnant women in domestic violent relationships. I think women are usually killed while pregnant or postpartum. So
I don't necessarily know that women are usually killed pregnant or postpartum. I don't
know about that, but what I do know is that there are some states where if you are pregnant, you cannot legally get divorced until the pregnancy is over. So if you're in an abusive relationship,
I've never heard of that.
It's absolutely true. I couldn't tell you which states off the top of my head, but if I were to do some research, I could. But there are states, I think Texas might be one of them, but it's not just Texas, where if you are pregnant and you are married to someone in an abusive relationship and you want to get divorced, no matter what the set of facts are, you cannot get that divorce while you are pregnant.
To me, these are just funny laws, man. They're funny laws, like New Jersey versus New York. One of my first couple of times in New Jersey, I was visiting somebody, and I said, I got to stop, and I got to bring somebody in our house. Like, we're going to drink some beer or something. Let me stop. So I was looking for like a gas station or a CVS or something where I could go in and pick up some beer. So I stopped at a gas station. I asked them if they had beer. They looked at me like I had two heads. They said no. Then I went to a CVS. I walked inside. They didn't have any beer. I went to another drugstore, walked inside, asked if they had any beer. They looked at me like I had two heads. So in New York, you can go to a grocery store or a gas station or a drugstore, and you can buy beer in the beer cooler with the soda and whatever else. In New Jersey, beer can only be sold by a licensed liquor distributor. So I didn't know this, and I was just visiting the same types of places I would visit in New York. Now, in my opinion, that's just kind of a weird law that really doesn't play out because it doesn't make any sense in the other states.
Yeah. The research department turned up. Arizona, Arkansas, Missouri, and Texas will not grant divorces to married couples if the wife is pregnant.
Well, that's a lot of states, actually.
So yeah, there's also. I want to address this one. When you hear about some states granting exceptions to their abortion bans, in the cases of like rape or incest,
no.
And to me, that's complete bullshit.
Why?
Because, well, it's bullshit because what you're effectively saying is we will only grant an abortion in the case where you having sex wasn't voluntary by like a legal definition. And it's like, I really hope I don't have to paint out this argument, but when you have such a policy, what you're really saying is we're banning abortion because we want to punish women who had sex.
That's exactly kind of what I was thinking. We're punishing people for having sex. You're being punished because you had sex and got pregnant, and basically saying you had unprotected sex, or you had protected sex and you were the 1% out of the 99% on the back of the Trojan box.
Yeah. No birth control is 100% effective. Sometimes things slip through.
And unfortunately, that's not within someone's control.
Nope. You can do everything right and she could still get pregnant.
And people don't have sex generally to get pregnant.
But that's where the religious connotations come in. Is like the hardcore religious people are saying you shouldn't be having sex with anyone
without being in marriage.
Without being in marriage and without the intention of getting pregnant.
Yeah, well, yeah. As far as a religious perspective is, if you're having sex, the intention needs to be to get pregnant. You're not having sex for fun.
This is not my position.
As far as any religion is concerned, there is no fun. It's just it's misery and prayer and tithing. But I mean, to me, it's interesting that you could allow, basically consent to sex, but not be able to give consent to pregnancy, right? So you can say, yes, we can have sex. And if you happen to be pregnant, you then don't have a choice after that, right? And in some states, you don't have to consent to pregnancy, so it could be rape. And then you get pregnant and you also...
Yeah, there's some states... so actually, this is a news article from today. Louisiana removed their exceptions for rape and incest. So now it's just no. And one of the pastors that was like giving remarks or whatever basically said like, if we have these exceptions, what's to stop a woman from just accusing a man that she was with of raping her so that she can get the abortion? How many people are going to be falsely accused because of that? I'm like, you hear yourself talk, man?
Yeah.
And so,
but I think it's a lot of people. It's a lot of people who are so far removed from that potential situation, which is funny. Also, it's not people that have never been in this situation, men mostly, or men who have been through a pregnancy where the woman or them did not wish to have it. But in many cases, actually, it is men who have been in this situation, who are basically making these laws for the constituents, not based on, it's very hypocritical, being my point, not based off their past experiences. And we just had, what was this one guy who was an NFL player? Remember this guy's name?
Herschel Walker,
who paid for an abortion and
multiple,
and happened to be anti-abortion in his campaign.
Right, and so here's you were talking about something that I think really bears further discussion, and that is a lot of the people that are voicing pro-life views and seeking to restrict abortion in some cases entirely have no idea how this is actually going to affect people. And there was a case in Florida. There's been more than one, but there was a case in Florida where a woman had a problematic pregnancy. Like, she wanted to have the baby, but, problems with the pregnancy, whatever, it happens. And she couldn't get an abortion. And during she interviewed with news stations, and she talked about how she voted for the abortion bans. And she's like, I had no idea that something like this could happen to me. And, this is terrible, what I'm having to go through, that I can't get the abortion that I need, that I medically need, but I voted for this. And so, as soon as these things start affecting them directly, their views start to change. And so, that's to me, the most asinine part about this, is that when you see conservative policies have an effect on conservatives, they actually start to change their views more towards liberal policies because they see the effect of the conservative policies are harming them. And when the policies were drafted, it was just harming that other person that they don't care about.
But here's the issue where we continue to make law after law after law, legislation upon legislation upon legislation. We keep making rules. And right now it seems like the liberals, I don't know how you would say it. I feel like the liberals were always the ones saying, let freedom be free, let's just relax, not create laws around things. And both sides right now are just trying to create laws around their beliefs, and in the face of the other side. And I don't think in a country where I
don't feel like that's an accurate. I feel like that's an exaggeration. It's not inaccurate. But
hear me out. In this country, in many cases, we have two very different sides of things. Okay, and there are some things that we've gotten past, like gay marriage, for example, which of course everybody thought was going to.
Haven't gotten past that. Actually, they're still working. They're still working on that.
We got past. This is me having the conversation in 1989 about Roe versus Wade, thinking we were past it. Okay. You hear me out? Yeah. So just like gay marriage, which is relatively new, we're past it. However, maybe we're not past it, but there are many things that we have basically that are super controversial. Gay marriage actually is a good example because it's still controversial, and we are making laws in these cases against the beliefs of the other side. And sure, gay marriage, I think it's probably a good thing that we have that law that gay people can get married, but maybe this is a bad example, but it's still in the face of everybody on the opposite side of the aisle. And it's really...
Actually, there's a really good corollary here between gay marriage and abortion.
What is it, the right to privacy?
Close.
Because I don't think that's it.
Let me ask you this. Regardless of your opinion of gay people, let's just imagine you don't like gay people, right?
Okay, that's not true, but...
I know, but I'm saying let's just imagine that you don't, okay?
All right.
If in the next town over, 2 gay people get married, how does that affect you?
Okay, it does not.
It doesn't at all.
But to step it up, if I'm the cake shop that's making the wedding cake shop that's making the wedding cake. All right, let's get back to it.
Let's imagine that you're pro-choice and you don't want people to get abortions.
Okay.
If a woman the next town over has an abortion, how does that affect you?
I agree.
It doesn't at all. So, gay marriage and abortion being hot button issues are ones that the people that care the most about them are the least affected by them. Which
is so fucking weird. Why people they dig into their roots and they staunchly just dig into these fucking controversial issues, and it has nothing to fucking do with them. These are the same people that claim the Bible says this or that, yet do some shit in the face of the Bible that's just completely bullshit. It's just kind of like on Sunday morning, people go out and they go to church and they pray, and then Sunday afternoon they go to brunch and get fucked up and do some dumbass shit.
Yep. So, yeah, you have to.
So here's my point, and we still have 10 minutes left, so we can talk about whatever the fuck afterwards. But I think Roe versus Wade being struck down, I don't think Roe versus Wade was a good law when it comes to protecting abortions. So I'm not fully against it being struck down. However, I believe in the face of that, our country, and we already decided that the population supports pro-choice, our country needs to come together, which I think would be relatively easy. And if we agree with a popular vote, not a very loud minority, but with the majority of the voting population agrees that women should have the right to pro-choice, then we create
a federal law that enshrines abortion up until a certain reasonable point.
Exactly. And back to the very specifics about abortion. It is a very complicated issue. You can go by brain function, or you can go by heartbeat, or you can go by viability. Just for the record, this is how it works. In certain states, we protect abortion by heartbeat, which, by the way, is not a heart. It's actually just an electrical signal being pulsed through the fetus. Okay? At that point in time, it's not a heartbeat. But when they say they can detect this electrical pulse, they're protecting that child.
And that's usually around 6 weeks.
Next up is brain function. So is there a brain? And is there any activity in the brain? So is there detectable brain activity? That's the next step up.
I don't know what point how many weeks in is that?
I don't know. It's more than heart, and it's less than viability. So maybe a month or two in.
Heartbeat isn't even until 6 weeks. And the thing is, most women won't even know that they're pregnant until about 5 or 6 weeks.
Well, women have their period every 28 days or so. So that's a month, basically. So if you just had your period and then you get pregnant and then you
miss a period,
4 weeks go by and you realize you didn't have a period, but that's no reason for alarm. And then 2 more weeks go by and you're like, oh shit, I'm very late. Which, by the way, 2 weeks isn't that late. Then you take a pregnancy test and say, hey, I'm 2 weeks late. Yeah, you're at the 6 week mark.
Right.
In most states, now it's illegal to get an abortion.
Right. By the time you have a minimal chance of knowing, you're no longer allowed to abort.
There's a lot of clinics in these very Republican, very right-wing places where you go to the clinic, and if they do an ultrasound to find out that you're roughly 4 or 5 weeks pregnant, they will push you off another few days or another week until you're after the 6 weeks. And these especially are the very religious, very Bible Belt type places. But
sometimes the state laws are designed to force them to do that, with the idea of this woman found out at 5 weeks and we're going to require a 1 week waiting period. Oh, now it's 6 weeks. You can't do it.
Yeah, exactly. That's what's happening. So
it's not necessarily the clinics that are doing it. It's the laws that the clinics are forced to follow.
So then there is brain activity. Now, brain activity, these babies aren't having dreams of showing up to school naked. All right. We're just talking about there being a brain, there being activity. Now, is the activity like them singing songs and rehearsing the music that you play through your belly? No. The activity is just simple electrical pulses happening at the brain, at the top of the head. Next is viability, and that's about 5 months or so in. Viability, it's after 5 months, I think.
Somewhere between 20 and 24 weeks.
It has to do with lung function. So the baby's lungs have to function. Given if that baby was born at that point in time, they could survive outside the womb. And this is a line,
albeit with significant medical intervention, but
obviously, but they couldn't. But there's a certain point, with or without medical intervention, that a fetus cannot survive outside of the womb, and its lung function. So once the lungs have formed, that fetus is viable. Now, in my opinion, that would be a really good place to draw the line as the beginning of a viable life.
That's what Roe v. Wade set out. That was the standard that Roe v. Wade went by. Is the fetus viable? If it's not viable, abortions are okay. If it is viable, now we're getting into pretty strong restrictions.
The issue is how sacred you believe the possibility of life. And
not at all.
I don't think it's that sacred. I'm not a religious person, but I don't think it's that sacred. And I think if you're going to step on an ant, but not want a 4-week-old baby to be aborted,
which is not much bigger than the ant.
No, it's not any bigger than the ant. But also the brain activity doesn't exist. and I'm sure some people disagree with me, but I imagine that their disagreement is based in the realm of religion, and this being a holy body that is being aborted. And to that level, I would say if you are someone who uses condoms or does the pull and pray method, you are effectively aborting thousands and hundreds of thousands of more potential children than aborting a child that is just been conceived, not a child.
Oh. What about embryo and went out,
or if you masturbate, yeah, and I, to me, it just statistically doesn't make any sense that if you use a condom, that you would be against somebody having an abortion at 6 weeks.
Well, a lot of these people are also against birth control and contraceptives of various things.
Even the Catholic Church has come around with condoms, right? And maybe not so much in the sense of birth control.
Yeah, but the Catholic Church, right now, the Catholic Church is pretty far left of a lot of religious organizations, which is crazy to say.
But the reason being is if you want to infiltrate Africa and other places, when it comes to being religious, and there are pretty heavily transmitted STDs, you need to be using condoms. Yeah. Right?
Sasha says there's also the issue of reproductive coercion, where men or women will lie about whatever birth control they're using to lock their partner with a child and coerce them into a marriage or staying, etc. I mean, yeah, that happens. I don't think it's that prevalent.
I don't think it's as obscure as you may believe. I've been in similar situations, and you got to be careful, my friend. You have to be very careful.
I mean, makes me think. I can't talk about this. Sorry.
There's certain to be had off air versus on air. What's this? Nearly half of all pregnancies yearly are unintended. And looking at studies done on reproductive coercion, it's really high.
Well, I'd like to see the data.
I'd like to see. I was just going to say I'd like to see the data, but again, it's also who you're sampling, and I don't believe any studies these days. I just know from personal experience what's out there and what's not out there, and I can tell you, also depending on who you are, it's if you're a woman and you're sleeping with a guy who's ugly and broke, like you're probably not trying to have an secretly get pregnant with this guy, right? So from that,
hold on. This makes me think Conway Twitty, a country artist, had an album titled "You're the Reason Our Kids Are Ugly."
You ever see that? You ever see the Korean ad for plastic surgery? There's a awesome Korean ad for plastic surgery, and it's a guy standing with his family, and there's a dude and his ultra beautiful wife, and they're fugly kids.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah, and it's an ad for basically plastic surgery, assuming the woman got plastic surgery, saying something along the lines of like, "He'll never know until you have kids" or something. I don't know.
Yeah, that's great advertising. I love it.
So we're told we have to wrap up. How do we wrap up on this?
Start by wrapping it up.
I agree. You should use protection.
I mean, it's just, and this is just a general comment about probably the next 5 to 10 years in this country. Things are going to get markedly worse before they start to get better.
I would agree with you. I would totally agree with you.
And a lot of people are going to end up suffering for this.
We have a presidential election coming up.
Oh yeah, it's going to be the most postmodern election we've ever had.
So just for the record, it's a Korean plastic surgery ad. I don't know if it's legit or not, but it was a meme for a while. And it's a guy and a beautiful woman, Korean, who have 3 children, and it says plastic surgery. You can't hide it forever. So
Sasha says, one article asked women if they ever lied about birth control to get pregnant, and 1 in 4 said yes. So it is high. 25% to me definitely would qualify as a high incidence rate. I would agree that's also high, but again, we don't know their samples. Yeah, it also is like how scientific was the sample of the people they asked?
So on that note, we want to thank you guys for joining our episode about abortion and Donald Trump. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast. We will see you guys next Thursday, as we don't see you every Thursday, but sometimes you see us, all three of you. Thank you for joining us.
Stick on air for a second. All right, stick off air for a second.
All right. Adios.
All right, you made it this far. If you have not already subscribed to SipTalk, the audio podcast platform on Spotify, Apple, anywhere else, or the video podcast on YouTube, go ahead and do so now. Thank you very much.
I like PBR. I just got priced out of it.